On the day of my divorce, my arrogant husband left me on the street, without a job and without money. Look at you. You think you're strong, but you're good for nothing. He yelled at me in front of our children. I, completely shattered, began looking for a job, and a month later, my ex-husband called me, regretful, when he found out that I had. The wall clock emitted a constant ticking that seemed to fill every corner of the house. The silence in the dining room was thick, almost suffocating. Maria sat at the table, looking at the coffee cup she held in her hands. The warm porcelain could not warm her cold fingers. Outside, the wind moved the curtains, but inside, everything seemed static, frozen in a forced calm. As her eyes wandered in the dark depths of the coffee, her mind began to recall. 10 years ago, Luis had made her a proposal that, at the time, seemed reasonable, even loving. You don't need to keep working, Maria. I can handle everything. I want you to be at home, relaxed, taking care of the kids, he had said one evening while they both rested on the sofa. His voice had been sweet, with that false warmth that she hadn't been able to recognize back then. The idea of dedicating herself to raising their children didn't seem bad. She thought her husband was right, that it was the best for the family. She didn't realize the price she would pay for it. The first months went well. Waking up with her children, taking them to school, and coming back home to tidy up gave her a sense of peace. But over time, the dynamics began to change. Luis started coming home late, with vague excuses, and his phone was always in his hand. Their conversations grew shorter, and the affectionate gestures disappeared. One day, while Maria was cleaning the living room, she noticed Luis' open wallet on the sofa. She wasn't a curious person, but a small piece of paper was sticking out. It was a receipt. The date was recent, and the purchase detail made her uneasy. A gold chain at a considerable price. She stood still, staring at the words. She knew she had never received such a gift from her husband. "Who is this for, Luis?" she asked in a tense voice that same night when he arrived home. "What thing?" he replied without looking at her, slowly taking off his shoes. "The gold chain you bought." "It wasn't for me, that's clear." Luis raised his head and looked at her with a mixture of surprise and disdain. His right eyebrow arched, and a cynical smile appeared on his face. "Are you going through my things now?" "I didn't know I was living with a spy," he replied, letting out a dry laugh that echoed through the room. "I didn't go through anything. It was in your wallet in plain view." "Don't avoid the question, Luis. Who did you buy the chain for?" Maria insisted, feeling her anger rise from her stomach to her throat. Luis looked at her with narrowed eyes. He took his time before answering, as if assessing how far he could push. "I don't owe you any explanations. You should be grateful you're still in this house, doing nothing while I break my back working," he said coldly, walking toward the kitchen. Maria felt a lump in her throat, but she didn't look away. She knew that if she did, he would win. She followed him into the kitchen, her steps firm, even though her heart was pounding violently. "I'm not going to accept that, Luis. Don't come at me with the 'I do nothing' excuse. Do you think keeping this house clean and raising our kids is nothing? Don't belittle me. Answer me now." Her voice cracked at the end, but she didn't back down. Luis put the water pitcher down and turned sharply, walking toward her with determined steps. He stopped a few inches from her face, his eyes filled with contained fury. "Shut up, Maria. Don't make me lose my patience. You have no idea how tired I am of you and your drama," he said in a low but cutting tone, staring at her as if he wanted to pierce her. Fear flooded her completely, but she didn't let him dominate her. She lifted her chin and met his gaze. "If you're so tired of me, why don't you leave?" she replied, her voice filled with a courage she didn't know she had. Luis laughed without humor. He stepped back and looked her up and down, with contempt. "Do you really think I can't do it? Tomorrow, I'll file the divorce papers. I'm done with this life with you, with this unbearable routine." His voice sounded like a dry slap that bounced off the kitchen walls. Maria felt something break inside her. For a moment, she wasn't sure if what she felt was sadness, anger, or relief. She kept staring at him, her mouth slightly open and her eyes wet. She didn't give him the satisfaction of crying in front of him. She tried to stay calm, taking deep breaths. Perfect. Do it. Someone who needs to humiliate others to feel big is of no use to me, she said before walking out of the kitchen, leaving him alone. There were no more words that night. Luis locked himself in the room while she stayed in the living room, staring at the ceiling, her mind full of dark thoughts. Exhaustion overcame her by dawn, and she fell asleep on the couch. 2 months later, the letter arrived. The envelope was white with no distinguishing marks. When she opened it, she saw the heading, Divorce Certificate. She didn't feel pain, but a cold emptiness settled in her chest. Her younger daughter, Camila, approached when she saw her sitting at the table with the letter in her hand. "Mommy, are you okay?" she asked in her sweet and concerned voice. Maria looked up and forced a smile. She didn't want to worry her children. "Yes, my love. Everything will be fine," she said, stroking her hair. The days following the receipt of the letter were gray. The hours stretched on endlessly. She felt trapped in a purposeless routine. The house became quieter, as if even the walls felt the emptiness left by Luis's absence. Money was running out and worries kept growing. "I can't keep going like this," she told herself one morning while sweeping the living room. That same afternoon, a familiar voice pulled her from her thoughts. "Maria, open the door, it's me, Lupita," she heard from the other side. When she opened it, she found her neighbor with a cloth bag in her hands and a worried look on her face. "You don't look well, dear. Come, sit with me for a bit," she said with the firmness of a mother. Maria obeyed. She didn't have the strength to refuse. She sat down in Lupita's kitchen, and after a few minutes of silence, she opened up. She spoke about the loneliness, the lack of money, the fears that tormented her at night. "Look, I'm not rich, but I have this," Lupita said, pulling out an envelope with money. Maria refused at first, shaking her head quickly. "I can't accept this, Lupita. You need it." Lupita leaned forward and firmly took Maria's hands. "I saved this money for my funeral, but I'd rather use it to see someone come back to life. Don't think too much about it, dear. Life doesn't stop because someone leaves. You have to move forward, for yourself and for your children," she said gently but determinedly. Maria's tears fell silently. She didn't answer right away, but something inside her heart changed. That night, while watching her children sleep, she knew she couldn't let herself be defeated. She promised herself that she would never rely on anyone again. She tucked the envelope from Lupita in her pocket, and the next morning, she got up with a purpose. "Today starts my new life," she whispered to herself as she looked at her reflection in the mirror. For the first time in months, her reflection met her gaze. She was no longer the woman who had let someone else make her feel small. She was ready to reclaim her place in the world. The sun began to slip through the blinds. The soft light illuminated Maria's face as she stared at her reflection in the mirror with a determination she hadn't felt in a long time. The air in the room seemed heavy, as though the entire house was holding its breath along with her. She no longer saw the fragile, exhausted woman who had been there in recent months. Something had changed. Her gaze didn't waver. She tied her hair with an elastic band, grabbed a clean shirt, and put it on with decisive movements. As she buttoned it up, her eyes never left the mirror. Her breath was slow and controlled, as if every inhale marked the start of a new chapter. "Today starts my new life," she whispered, ensuring those words stayed locked in her mind. Sounds began to stir in the house as her children moved around. Camila's voice called from the bedroom. "Mommy, I can't find my shoes." The little girl complained, with that high-pitched tone of urgency and impatience. Maria smiled slightly and left the room, ready to take charge. She walked into Camila's room, where she found the 6-year-old rummaging under the bed, her short legs barely visible at the edge. Maria crouched down, peered under the bed, and grabbed the shoes covered in dust. "Here they are, little whirlwind," she said with a smile, brushing off the dust with her hands. Camila looked up at her with wide, shining eyes. She ran over to her and hugged her waist. "Are you sad today, Mommy?" She asked bluntly, as only children can do. Maria felt the weight of the question like a blow to her chest. She stroked her daughter's head and took a deep breath. No, my love. Not today. Today, I'm ready for everything, she answered with a smile that this time didn't feel forced. Camila's hug was warm and comforting. There was no need to say more. The day passed between household tasks and taking care of the children. Donna Lupita's money was hidden in a metal box in the pantry, but every time she passed by, she felt the envelope calling her. She couldn't afford to spend it without thinking. Not now. She had to use it wisely. The smell of coffee filled the kitchen, and while she stirred her cup, the front door slammed open. Mom, Dad is outside. Sebastian shouted from the doorway. Maria's body tensed immediately. The calm she had felt in the morning disappeared in a second. She wiped her hands on her apron and walked toward the door with calculated steps. Her heart was pounding, but her face remained serene. She wasn't going to let him see her tremble. Luis was at the doorway, one hand in the pocket of his jeans and the other holding his phone. His wrinkled shirt and days-old beard gave him a disheveled look, but his smile was the same as always, arrogant and cynical. What do you want, Luis? Maria asked without opening the door completely. Is this how you greet me? I thought that after all this time, you'd welcome me with a little more respect, said Luis, leaning slightly to look her in the eyes. Respect is earned, and you lost it a long time ago. Tell me what you want and get this over with. Luis let out a dry laugh. I'm here to see my kids. Or are you going to stop me from doing that now too? He said, raising his voice so the kids could hear him. You're not here for them, Luis. What do you really want? Maria insisted, pressing her fingers against the doorframe. Luis frowned. His patience, always short, was running out. He took a step forward, forcing her to take a small step back. I want to talk. I'm not here to fight. Can't we speak like adults? He said, trying to sound reasonable. Maria didn't answer right away. She stared at him, searching for any sign of honesty, but all she saw was a man who wasn't used to having the door slammed in his face. Whatever you have to say it here. You're not coming in, she replied firmly. Luis sneered and shook his head. You're still acting this way, Maria. You think you're strong, but we all know you can't do it on your own. Look at you, living with the bare minimum, no luxuries, no comforts. You won't be able to live like this for long. His eyes looked at her with that mix of pity and mockery he used to destabilize her. Put your pride aside and think about your kids. The words fell like stones, but this time they didn't faze her. Maria lifted her chin and crossed her arms. My kids are better off without a man who thinks money is everything. Get out, Luis. You have no power here anymore, she said with a calm that even surprised her. For a moment, Luis seemed to hesitate. His eyes scanned her face, looking for a crack, a sign of weakness. But he found none. His smile vanished, and his jaw tightened. Don't worry, Maria. Life has its twists. You won't always be so sure of yourself, he said before turning and walking away with heavy steps. Maria closed the door and leaned against it. Her breath trembled now that she was alone. She didn't cry. She wouldn't give him that pleasure. Mom, why did Dad come? Sebastian asked, watching her from the living room. Maria bent down, looked him in the eyes, and smiled. Sometimes people come back because they can't stand to see we're better off without them, she said, gently stroking his cheek. Don't worry, honey. Everything will be fine. The boy nodded, a mix of confusion and relief on his face. That night, after the kids were asleep, Maria took the metal box from the pantry. She opened the lid and pulled out the envelope with the money. She counted every bill patiently. Her mind was racing. It's not much, but it's enough to get started, she murmured to herself. She thought about the possibilities. She could use it to pay off some debts, but that would only be a temporary relief. No, she needed to make the money grow. She grabbed an old notebook and started writing down ideas. Freelance translations, online sales, selling homemade food. There wasn't an idea she wouldn't consider. Suddenly, the phone vibrated. A message from an unknown number. She cautiously opened the conversation. "I know everything you're doing. Don't think you've gotten away with it." The message made her stop. Her chest tightened. She checked the number, but didn't recognize it. Her mind filled with possibilities. Louise? Someone he knew? Someone else? She blocked the number, but the discomfort had already settled in her body. She looked at the door to the house, making sure it was properly locked. The silence felt heavier than ever. She checked the windows, walking lightly, trying not to make a sound. "Don't get scared. Not again," she told herself as she slid the bolt on the door. The message didn't repeat that night, but the unease stayed with her until bed. She lay down without turning off the light, eyes wide open, listening to every creak of the wood, every whisper of the wind. Her mind kept repeating the same question. Who is watching me? The shadows in the room no longer seemed harmless. Every movement was a potential threat. She knew that this time, it wasn't just about surviving. It was a war against everything that wanted to see her fall. And she wasn't going to lose. Not this time. The next morning, the morning sun filled the room with pale light. The rays filtered through the curtains, casting golden lines on the wall. Maria woke up with the feeling that the night had been longer than usual. The creaks of the house and the whispers of the wind still echoed in her mind. She had slept with the lamp on, and the tiredness was still in her body, but she couldn't afford to weaken. She looked at the clock on the nightstand. 6:45 a.m. The world kept moving, and so did she. She sat up in bed and let her feet touch the cold floor. The cold brought her back to the present. Today wouldn't be just any day. Today, she would make a decision. "I'm not going to hide anymore," she said quietly, rubbing her face with both hands. "I'm going to win this time." With that thought, she got up and went to the kitchen. The kids were still sleeping, and the silence in the house gave her space to think clearly. She opened the metal box she had kept in the pantry and looked at the envelope with the money Donna Lupita had given her. She counted the bills again. They hadn't grown, but they hadn't decreased either. The amount was still the same, and with that, she had to make an important decision. That morning, after serving breakfast to the kids, Maria sat them down at the table. The three of them ate in silence until Sebastian, with his mouth full of bread, looked up at his mother. "Mom, why do you always look at the door when we're eating?" he asked with the innocence only a child could have. Maria set her fork down on the table. She looked at him gently, then quickly glanced at the door. "Because now I'm the one watching over the house, son," she replied, gently stroking his head. "Is Dad coming back?" asked Camila, her curious little eyes fixed on her mother. Maria took a deep breath. She didn't want to give them false hope or scare them. She took her daughter's small hand and squeezed it affectionately. "He's not coming back, and that's okay. We're going to be okay. Just the three of us," she said, looking them in the eyes, sure of every word. The kids nodded slowly. They didn't say anything else, but the silence that followed was different. It was no longer the uncomfortable pause from before. This time, it was a moment of understanding. Hours later, after washing the dishes and tidying the house, Maria sat down in front of the laptop she had used for years to secretly do translations. She pressed her lips together and began searching for job listings. Most of the vacancies required recent experience and degrees she didn't have, but she didn't let that intimidate her. She kept searching until one post caught her attention. Translator needed with immediate availability. Remote or in-person work. Growing young company. No office experience required, only commitment and proven skills. "This is mine," she said with determination, clicking to apply. She filled out every field carefully, detailing the years she had worked as a freelance translator. Although she had done it in the shadows, she wasn't going to let that make her feel less capable. When she reached the experience section, she stared at the screen for a few seconds. What if they don't accept me? She thought, as a twinge of insecurity slipped through her chest. She couldn't afford to think that way. She finished filling it out, submitted the application, and closed the laptop. Just then, the phone vibrated on the table. Her heart skipped a beat. She couldn't help but remember the strange message she had received the night before. She looked at the screen cautiously. It was an unknown number. The phone vibrated again. Maria didn't answer right away. She kept staring at the screen, waiting for the call to end. The ringtone stopped, but a few seconds later, the phone rang again. This time, she took it firmly and swiped her finger to answer. "Hello?" she said in a tense voice. "Is this Mrs. Maria Garcia?" asked a woman's voice on the other end. "Yes, it's me." "Who's speaking?" she asked, feeling her heart start to race. "I'm calling from the translation company, Lexus. We reviewed your application and are interested in scheduling an interview for tomorrow. Would you be able to come in at 10 a.m.? asked the voice in a friendly and professional tone. The relief was so sudden that she felt her legs weaken. She quickly sat down in the chair, one hand on her chest. "Yes, of course. That time works for me," she replied, trying to sound calm, but her voice faltered. "Perfect. I'll send you the address details via text message. See you tomorrow, Mrs. Garcia," said the woman before hanging up. Maria put the phone down on the table and covered her face with both hands. The air suddenly felt lighter. It had been so long since she last had an opportunity, and now it felt like a small door had opened in front of her. The next day, she woke up earlier than usual. She made sure the children's uniforms were ready and the breakfasts were prepared before leaving. Mrs. Lupita had agreed to watch the kids while she went to the interview. "They'll accept you, sweetie. God always opens doors for brave women," Lupita told her as she received the kids. Maria thanked her with a smile. She didn't say much more, but the phrase stayed with her. Walking down the street to the bus stop was different that morning. She no longer looked at the ground. She held her head high, observing the people passing by. There was something different in her step. She felt more confident. When she arrived at the company, a small building with glass windows, she stopped in front of the entrance door. Her reflection looked back at her from the glass. She was no longer the same woman who had allowed herself to be locked in an invisible cage. She was someone about to enter a new world, a world that didn't expect her, but also couldn't deny her. "Let's go," she told herself. Upon entering, a receptionist greeted her with a smile. She was led to a small waiting room. Her hands were sweaty, but she rubbed them against her jeans to dry them. Several minutes passed before a woman appeared at the door. "Mrs. Maria, please follow me," said the woman in a firm voice. She led her down a hall to a small office. Behind the desk sat a woman with brown hair pulled back into a bun. She looked at her with a kind smile, but eyes that assessed every detail. "I'm Ana Fernanda, the director of this company. Please have a seat." Maria sat down, straightening her back. She wasn't going to show nervousness. "Not today." "Tell me about yourself, Maria," asked Ana Fernanda, her fingers intertwined on the desk. Maria began to speak. She hid nothing. She talked about the years she spent at home raising her children, about the translations she did secretly, about the long sleepless nights to deliver work on time. The director didn't interrupt her once. "Interesting," said Ana Fernanda at the end with a small smile. "It's a common story, but the way you tell it is not." Maria looked up, confused. "Most people hide what you just told me. You said it with pride. That's rare, and I like that." Ana Fernanda stood up and extended her hand. "Welcome to the team, Maria. We'll see you on Monday." Maria's heart raced. She stood up and shook Ana Fernanda's hand firmly. "Thank you. I won't let you down," she said in a voice full of certainty. She left the company with her gaze set ahead. This wasn't just a job. It was the beginning of something bigger. There was no turning back. No one, not even Luis, could take away what she had now earned. The Monday sun illuminated the city with an intensity that did not match the coldness Maria felt inside. She walked firmly towards the Lexus company, but her mind wasn't calm. Insecurities tried to creep into her head like whispering voices, repeating the same old phrases. "You're not enough. They're going to fire you in the first week. You don't know what you're doing." But that morning, Maria didn't hear those voices. She shook them off like rain droplets from a coat. She had no time to doubt. She had promised herself she would never again be the woman who let Luis silence her voice. Now, she was in control, and no one was going to take that away from her. When she arrived at the Lexus building, the automatic door opened with a soft hum. The receptionist greeted her with a quick smile and a nod. Maria responded in kind, but without stopping. Her gaze was fixed on the hallway leading to her new office. She was no longer a woman who went unnoticed. Maria, good morning, greeted Ana Fernanda from the door of her office. Her tone was professional, but with a slight touch of warmth. Good morning, Ana Fernanda, Maria responded with a firm voice. Come, I want to introduce you to the team, Ana Fernanda said, as she gestured for Maria to follow. Maria's heart raced, but her face remained calm. She walked alongside the director as they passed through a hallway illuminated with white lights. The feeling of being in a professional space filled her with a mix of nervousness and pride. This is our translation team, Ana Fernanda said, as they entered an open workroom with desks arranged neatly and people focused on their screens. Everyone here specializes in different areas, from technical translation to literary texts. You'll be working with Carlos and Rebecca for now. Carlos looked up from his screen and smiled warmly. He was a man in his 30s, with thick-framed glasses and a calm expression. Nice to meet you, Maria. Welcome, Carlos said, extending his hand. Thank you, Carlos. I'm excited to get started, she replied, shaking his hand firmly. Rebecca, on the other hand, barely looked up and murmured a quick greeting before returning to typing rapidly. Her expression wasn't hostile, but she showed no interest in Maria's presence. Ana Fernanda noticed this but didn't comment. She simply smiled. Rebecca is like this at first. Give her some time, Ana Fernanda whispered, pointing to an empty desk. This will be your space. Maria sat at her new desk, observing her work area. Her desk was clean, the chair was comfortable, and the computer glowed with a welcome screen. It was then that she felt something important had changed in her life. For the first time in years, she wasn't sitting at home waiting for someone to tell her what to do. This space was hers, and that was priceless. Days passed with a mix of learning and challenges. Every text she translated became a small victory. Carlos' feedback helped her improve, while Rebecca stayed distant, occasionally glancing at her as if silently evaluating. This paragraph is really good, but try using a more neutral option for this word. Sometimes the literal translation doesn't work, Carlos advised as he pointed at the screen. Maria nodded and made a mental note. She didn't feel diminished by accepting suggestions. On the contrary, every correction made her feel like she was moving forward. Until something strange happened. It was 5:40 p.m., and most of the employees were getting ready to leave. Maria was reviewing her last text of the day when a shadow moved near the glass window of the entrance. She glanced over quickly, but saw no one. Her body tensed immediately. She knew her mind might be playing tricks on her, but she didn't ignore the feeling. She stood up from her chair and slowly approached the glass door. The hallway was empty. Everything okay? Carlos asked from his office. Yeah, I just thought I saw something, Maria replied, downplaying it. She returned to her seat, but the discomfort lingered. Every little noise made her turn her head toward the door. On Friday, after an impeccable week of work, Ana Fernanda called her into her office. I want to congratulate you, Maria. You did an excellent job this week. Few people adapt as quickly as you, she said, looking at her with a sincere smile. Thank you. I'm doing my best to learn quickly, Maria replied humbly but with satisfaction. I'm not saying this to be polite. I'm saying it because I've seen it. This company needs people with character, and you have that, Ana Fernanda said, leaning forward. I want to make you an offer. Maria looked at her attentively. I want you to work directly with me on the upcoming big projects. This is an opportunity for you to grow, but also to gain more visibility within the company. I don't offer this to just anyone, Ana Fernanda said, locking her eyes with Maria's. The offer took her by surprise. She had barely been there a week, and they were already considering her for something so important. Her heart raced, but she didn't let it overwhelm her. I accept. I want to give my best, she replied confidently. Ana Fernanda smiled and stood up from her chair. Then, get ready. "Things are going to get interesting," she said before opening the door for Maria to leave. That night, as she left the company, a feeling of alertness swept over her. She felt like she was being watched. She walked briskly down the sidewalk, holding her bag tightly against her body. She glanced sideways every time she passed a dark entryway or a parked vehicle. She didn't know where the feeling was coming from, but her body was telling her she wasn't alone. As she crossed a street, the sound of an engine starting behind her made her turn around quickly. She saw a black car with its headlights on. The car didn't move, but the headlights stayed fixed in her direction. Maria quickened her pace, clutching her bag to her chest. "Don't run, don't run, don't run," she told herself, knowing that if she ran, the other person would know she was scared. The car started moving slowly. Her whole body tensed. Her mind screamed for her to do something. She couldn't go straight home. She didn't want anyone to know where she lived. She thought quickly and turned down a street filled with small shops. She stepped into a bakery and pretended to look for something in the display case. The car passed slowly but didn't stop. The fear was still there. Her body was on high alert, her breath quickening. She waited several minutes before leaving. When she did, she looked both ways down the street. There was no sign of the black car. She walked quickly to her house and locked the door with all the locks. "Mom, why are you so late?" Sebastian asked from the living room. "I had to buy something on the way," she replied, trying to sound calm. She went over to her children, hugged them tightly, and kissed each one on the forehead. That evening, as she sat at the table to have dinner with them, she felt something different. Her mind was clearer. She was no longer the scared woman. She was a woman who now understood that no matter how many shadows from the past tried to catch her, she would always run faster. And if they caught her, she wouldn't run. That night, she checked her phone one last time before going to bed. A message from an unknown number appeared on the screen. "Don't think you're so smart. I'm always watching you." Maria's body tensed. This time, she didn't ignore it. She made an immediate decision. "I'm never hiding again," she said as she deleted the number and opened the police reporting app. This time, she wasn't alone. Now she had a strength that even Luis couldn't break. The night wind slammed into Maria's bedroom window, making the glass rattle with a dry sound. The streetlight outside shone through the curtains, illuminating the shadows in the room. Maria's phone was on the nightstand, its screen still glowing, showing the last message she had received. "Don't think you're so smart. I'm always watching you." The words were like a knife cutting through the air around her. This wasn't the first time she had received this kind of message, but this time, she had decided not to stay silent. She reported it through the police app, logging the number. But that wasn't enough to calm her mind. She got out of bed carefully, not to wake the kids, and walked barefoot to the living room. Her breathing was slow but deep. The feeling of being watched wouldn't leave her. She checked the locks on the doors and windows of the house, making sure everything was in place. Her eyes lingered on the empty street. There was no one, but that didn't mean she was alone. "I'm not going to let you break me again," she whispered to herself as she quickly drew the curtains shut. Back in her room, she lay down, but her eyes stayed wide open. The sound of her children's breathing from the next room calmed her, but not enough. Her body was on high alert. She didn't know if it was Luis or someone else, but this time she wasn't going to sit idly by. She stared at the ceiling for a long time, the words of the message spinning in her head. She wasn't afraid. She was angry. On Monday morning, Maria woke up early. The children were still asleep, but she was already in the kitchen preparing breakfast. The smell of coffee filled the room, and her gaze was fixed on the window as she stirred her cup. There were no new messages on her phone, but that didn't mean the danger had disappeared. When the children woke up, she greeted them with a calm smile. "Today we're having pancakes," she said enthusiastically as she set the plates on the table. "Pancakes?" shouted Camila, jumping with excitement, while Sebastian sat down, rubbing his eyes. The smile of her children brought her calm. It was for them that she couldn't allow herself to fall into paranoia. They needed her strong, not scared. They had breakfast together, laughed, talked about the cartoons they were watching and about school. It was one of those moments where everything seemed normal. But inside her, the tension didn't go away. Before leaving for work, she gave clear instructions to Donna Lupita, who would be looking after the children that afternoon. If anyone calls or asks for me, don't open the door and don't give out any information, okay? She said seriously. Don't worry, daughter. No one touches my family. I'll take care of this house as if it were my own, replied Lupita, giving her a pat on the back. Maria hugged her tightly and said goodbye to the children. She walked to the bus stop with the feeling that she was being followed, but didn't look back. She wasn't going to show any signs of fear. People with bad intentions can smell fear, like a predator sensing its prey. She wasn't going to give anyone that power. The atmosphere at Lexus was more agitated than usual. Ana Fernanda had requested a meeting with the entire translation team. Maria sat at the table in the meeting room, surrounded by Carlos, Rebecca, and 2 other employees she barely knew. Ana Fernanda's voice filled the room with the same firmness as always. We have a new client, and this time we can't make mistakes. This is an important, high-profile account. I need everyone to step up. Maria, I want you to work directly with me on this project, said Ana Fernanda, looking at her intently. Carlos looked up, surprised. Rebecca frowned and let out an almost imperceptible sigh, but it was enough for everyone to notice. Why her? Asked Rebecca, breaking the calm in the room. Ana Fernanda looked at her calmly, but with an authority that didn't need shouting to be heard. Because she's proven herself. And if you have an issue with that, we can talk privately, replied Ana Fernanda with a sharp look. Rebecca lowered her head and said no more. Maria felt everyone's gaze on her, but she didn't flinch. She sat upright, her eyes fixed on Ana Fernanda. She wasn't the same woman who had felt small for years. This time, she was the one in control. I'm ready for the project, she said firmly. Perfect. We'll start after this meeting, concluded Ana Fernanda, lightly tapping the table. Hours passed quickly. Maria worked side by side with Ana Fernanda, reviewing documents, adjusting translations, and coordinating with other teams. The director didn't spare compliments, but she also didn't hesitate to give critiques. She was demanding but fair, and that pleased Maria. She felt like she was growing professionally with every day spent there. Everything was going well until, as she left the company, she saw him. A few meters from the main door, a man was standing, leaning against a lamppost. He wore a dark jacket and a cap that covered his face. He held a phone in his hand, but his eyes were fixed on her. Maria stopped for a moment. Her breath quickened, but she showed no fear. I'm not running, she told herself. She crossed the street with steady steps, without looking at him, but she felt his gaze on her. She could feel the weight of his eyes following every movement. She turned the corner and, without thinking, entered a nearby pharmacy. She walked down the aisles, pretending to look for something. From one of the mirrors in the store, she saw him. The man was at the door, staring at her. He didn't enter, but he didn't leave either. Maria felt her chest fill with fire. It wasn't fear. It was anger. She had spent too much time in her life running, enduring humiliation and hiding. She wasn't going to do that anymore. She took out her phone and opened the police app. This time, she didn't just send a complaint. This time, she quickly took a photo through the reflection in the mirror. The man didn't notice. Let's see who's following who now, she murmured, clenching her jaw. She walked out of the pharmacy with the same calm she entered with. She walked with steady steps, feeling that he was following her from a distance. But this time, she knew something he didn't know. She had a photo. She had proof. When she got home, her phone vibrated. She looked at the screen. It was a message. Nice photo, but don't try to mess with me. Maria's heart raced. She looked around as if expecting to see the man hiding behind some corner. But the street was empty. How did he know? She thought, feeling a chill run down her spine. That night, she closed all the windows and checked every room, making sure everything was in order. When the children fell asleep, she sat in the living room with the phone in her hand, looking at the message over and over again. She didn't know who the man was or why he was following her, but one thing was clear. He wouldn't stop. And neither would she. She grabbed the phone, opened the police chat, and typed, "I need protection for my children. Someone is following me." The message was sent. There was no turning back. This time, she wouldn't stay silent. This time, the prey would become the hunter. "If you think you're going to scare me, you're terribly wrong," she said quietly as she leaned back in the chair, staring into the darkness outside. The streetlights flickered in the distance. She didn't know what was coming, but she was ready to face it. She was no longer the same. She would never be the same. The night was enveloped in an unsettling silence. The shadows of trees danced with the wind, casting whimsical shapes on the walls of Maria's house. The street, usually calm, now felt different, with an undercurrent of constant threat that only Maria seemed to sense. From the living room window, Maria watched intently outside, motionless. Her eyes were fixed on the empty street, searching for any sign of movement, any clue that the unknown presence was nearby. She saw no one, but it didn't calm her. She knew that you couldn't always see the enemy, but that didn't mean it wasn't there. The wall clock marked 11:47 p.m. The children were asleep, and the house was silent except for the soft ticking of the clock and the distant hum of the streetlights. She checked her phone once more. No new messages, but the last one was still there. "Nice photo, but don't try to mess with me." Maria clenched her jaw. Her finger slid across the screen as she looked again at the photo taken in the pharmacy's reflection. The image wasn't perfect, but it was clear enough to make out the dark jacket, the cap tilted forward, and the silhouette of the man. It wasn't Luis. She was sure of it. It wasn't his build or his way of moving. This man had a different presence, more methodical, more patient, like a hunter hiding among the bushes, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. She made a decision. She wouldn't stay on the defensive any longer. She blocked the number the message came from and opened the chat with the police. She typed, "I have a photo of the man following me. I need advice on the next steps." The message was sent. She knew she wouldn't get an immediate reply, but the sense of control returned to her chest. It was small, but it was there. After checking all the windows and doors in the house, she sat down in the living room with a cup of coffee in her hands. She wasn't going to sleep that night. Not because she was scared, but because she wanted to stay alert. She wouldn't let her guard down again. Never again. The next day, sunlight filtered through the window, signaling the arrival of a new day. Maria's eyes were tired, but she didn't feel exhaustion. She had been awake all night with only coffee for company. She rose calmly, stretched, and went to wake the children. Sebastian opened his eyes slowly, while Camila mumbled from her bed. "5 more minutes, Mom," the girl murmured, face buried in her pillow. "No 5 minutes today, warrior." "Get up," Maria said with a smile. The sound of the children getting ready for school filled the house with a different energy. The rush of footsteps, the cries of, "I can't find my sock," and innocent laughter mixed, making the house feel full of life. It was the kind of noise that once felt tiring, but now seemed like a reminder of what she was protecting. Before leaving for work, she looked at Dona Lupita seriously. "If anyone asks about me or gets close to the house, call me immediately. And don't open the door for anything, okay?" she said while handing the children's backpacks. "Don't worry, Maria. I'll take care of them like they're my own," Dona Lupita replied with the same strength she always spoke with. That woman might be older, but her spirit was stronger than many young people. At Lexus, everything seemed normal. Carlos greeted her with a smile, and Rebecca didn't make any sarcastic comments, which immediately caught Maria's attention. Normally, Rebecca always had a sharp remark when she saw her, but today she just looked at her with that serious expression, neither angry nor sympathetic. Maria didn't pay attention. Her mind was elsewhere. Ana Fernanda called her into her office as soon as she arrived. "Close the door, please," Ana Fernanda said in a tone different from usual. Maria closed the door and sat down across from her. "Is everything okay?" Maria asked, noticing that Ana Fernanda's face was more tense than usual. "I received a strange notification this morning," Ana Fernanda said, intertwining her fingers on the desk. Someone sent me an email with pictures of you. Pictures of you on the street, coming in here, leaving the pharmacy. Maria's world stopped. She felt a pressure on her chest that took her breath away for a moment. Pictures of me? Who sent them? She asked in a tense voice. Ana Fernanda turned the screen of her computer and showed her the email. It was an anonymous message. There was no sender, just a short text. Don't trust her. You don't know who you're working with. The photos were there. Images of her on the street, walking toward her house, the photo of her inside the pharmacy, taken through the glass of the door. The air in the room grew thick. Maria felt her heart pounding in her chest. I have no idea who's doing this, Ana Fernanda. I haven't done anything wrong, she said firmly, looking her boss in the eyes. Ana Fernanda stared at her with the same coldness she had faced Rebecca with days before. I know. I don't let myself be manipulated by anonymous emails, she replied, leaning forward. But I want you to tell me if there's anything in your past that could affect your safety or the company's. I don't like people who hide. Maria took a deep breath. She wasn't going to hide anything anymore. I had a relationship with a man who tried to control me and beat me for years. I got out of that, but it seems like he still hasn't accepted it. I don't know if it's him or someone else playing with my head, but I'm not going to let them take this from me. I'm not going to lose my job, Ana Fernanda, she said with a voice that had the force of a storm. Ana Fernanda watched her for a few seconds, her gaze intense. That's what I wanted to hear. You're not fired. But stay alert. If you need anything, let me know directly. Understood? She said firmly. Maria nodded. She expected nothing less from Ana Fernanda. She was not a woman to be intimidated. The workday was different. Every time someone passed by her desk, she felt the gaze on her neck. She knew it wasn't real, but she couldn't shake it. The eyes of the man in the dark jacket were still there, even when he wasn't. At lunchtime, she decided to step out and buy something. She crossed the street calmly, looking both ways. She walked to the same pharmacy where the picture had been taken. From a distance, she saw him. The man in the dark jacket. He was at the corner, leaning against a wall, with the cap pulled low. He wasn't looking directly at her, but Maria knew he was watching. His eyes were hidden, but his body was angled in her direction. Fear tried to take over her, but she wouldn't let it. Not this time. She took out her phone, openly, and pointed the camera at him. She recorded. It didn't matter if he saw her or not. She wasn't going to hide. The man raised his head. He looked directly at her. It was the first time they'd faced off like that. Maria didn't lower the camera. She didn't look away. Come if you want. This time, I'm not running, she said quietly, feeling her breath grow heavier. The man didn't move. He stayed there for a few seconds, then turned and disappeared into the crowd. Maria lowered the camera, trembling, but with her heart on fire. I'm not going to live in fear. Not this time. She walked back to Lexus with her head held high. She knew the ghost of her past was close. But this time, she was the hunter and he the prey. The rain hammered against the roof of the house, filling the air with a constant, rhythmic sound. The drops slid down the living room window like small, endless races. Maria sat on the couch, her head resting in the palm of her hand, watching outside. Her eyes were fixed on the empty street, but her mind was elsewhere. The phone vibrated on the table. Her gaze slowly moved to the screen. She didn't recognize the number, but it didn't matter anymore. She picked up the phone and answered. Hello? Her voice was firm, without a trace of fear. Hi, Maria. Did you miss me? The deep, familiar voice hit her like an electric shock. The air in the room grew heavier. Her heart raced, but she didn't let it show in her voice. No, Luis. I didn't miss you. And I have nothing to say to you, she replied, keeping control. I have things to say to you, Maria. Don't think you can hide behind doors and security cameras. I've seen you like to play the brave one, filming me from afar. But you forget I'm always one step ahead. His tone was slow, deliberate, each word calculated to provoke. Maria felt the anger rise from her stomach. She wasn't going to let him make her back down. Not this time. So, why don't you come face to face? Or are you only brave from the shadows? She replied with a calmness she didn't know she had. There was silence on the line. Maria knew she had touched a nerve. Be careful, Maria. You don't want your children to pay for your pride, he finally said, with such coldness it froze her blood. If you dare touch them, there will be nowhere for you to hide. I promise you that, she answered without hesitation. She immediately hung up, took a deep breath, closed her eyes for a few seconds, and then stood up. She glanced around, checking the doors and windows. She went to the children's room. Sebastian and Camila were sleeping deeply, their small breaths soft and rhythmic. The peace on their faces was all she needed to keep going. She grabbed her phone and opened the police app. This time, she didn't just make a report. She requested a protection order, a restraining order against Luis. She knew it wouldn't be easy, but she wouldn't wait for someone else to protect her. The following days were tense. At work, Ana Fernanda watched her more closely than before, but didn't pressure her. Maria continued to do her job with precision. Rebecca, on the other hand, looked at her with a mix of disdain and curiosity, as though trying to figure out why someone like Maria received so much recognition in such a short time. You look tired. Everything okay? Carlos asked as he approached her desk. Everything's fine, Carlos. I haven't been sleeping much lately, but that's nothing new, she replied with a light smile. Carlos looked at her for a few seconds, as if he knew there was something more. He didn't insist. He had always respected her silences, and for that, Maria appreciated him. At the end of the day, before leaving the office, her phone vibrated again. This time, it wasn't a message or a call. It was a notification from the security system of her house. The app showed a real-time video from the entrance. The camera captured a figure moving quickly in front of the door. The image was blurry due to the rain, but she made out a dark jacket and a cap. Not this time, she murmured to herself as she headed toward the exit. She opened the app and pressed the emergency alert button, which sent a direct notification to the local police. Then she called Dona Lupita. Dona Lupita, are the kids okay? Did you see anyone near the house? She asked in a fast voice, not trying to hide the urgency. Don't worry, dear, everything's fine here. The kids are playing with their toys. I didn't see anything strange. Why, has something happened? Asked the neighbor, concerned. Nothing, Dona Lupita, I just wanted to check. Don't open the door to anyone, please, Maria said before hanging up. The knot in her chest tightened, but she wasn't going to give in. As she left the office, she headed straight for the police station. She could no longer rely on luck. She walked in with steady steps and asked to speak with an officer. I'd like to file a formal complaint for harassment and request protection measures for my children and myself, she said to the officer at reception. Name of the perpetrator? Asked the officer as he powered up the computer. Luis Montalvo. He's the father of my children, she replied firmly, without hesitation. The officer raised his gaze. Do you have any evidence? He asked, his tone more serious. Yes, I have screenshots of his messages, a recording of him following me, and the alerts from my house's camera. Here are the videos and photos, she said while taking out her phone and showing them. The officer looked through the files carefully. This is enough to start the request for the restraining order. We'll need you to sign the official statement, he said, looking at her seriously. Maria signed each document with the determination of someone who was no longer afraid. She knew this battle wouldn't be quick, but she had made the decision to fight until the end. That night, calm seemed to return to the house. Maria sat in the living room, watching her kids play on the carpet with their action figures. Camila laughed every time Sebastian made his toy fly through the air. The laughter of her children was all she needed to know she was doing the right thing. Suddenly, someone knocked forcefully on the door. The children looked at each other, scared. Maria's heart skipped a beat. She slowly walked to the door and looked through the peephole. Her body tensed instantly. Luis was there. He wasn't wearing the jacket or the cap, but she knew it was him. His posture, his look of disdain, the way he tilted his head slightly to the left when he was trying to intimidate someone. It was him. Maria, open the door. I know you're in there. Don't make this harder, Luis yelled, banging the door with his open palm. The children ran to their mother and clung to her legs. Camila was trembling, while Sebastian looked at the door with wide, fearful eyes. "Calm down, everything's fine. Nothing's happened. Mommy's here," she said, gently stroking their heads. She grabbed the phone and immediately dialed the police. "My ex-husband is at my door. He has a restraining order in progress. I need a patrol car right now," she said, trying to sound calm. "The patrol is on its way, ma'am." "Do not open the door under any circumstances," replied the operator's voice. "I wasn't planning on it," Maria said, while watching Luis through the peephole. Luis gave one last knock on the door and stepped back. He looked directly at her, even though he knew she couldn't be seen through the peephole. "This isn't over, Maria," he said with a cold smile. "No, Luis. This is just beginning," she replied softly to herself, feeling the strength in every word. When the red and blue lights from the patrol car lit up the street, Luis raised his hands with a cynical smile. The officers approached him while Maria watched from the window. "You're going to lose, Luis," she whispered, tightly hugging her children. She didn't need anyone to save her. She had saved herself. She had decided to never be the victim again. And that, she knew, was what hurt Luis the most. That night, when she lay down, for the first time in a long time, she fell asleep with her eyes closed. Dawn brought a calm that hadn't been felt in Maria's house for a long time. The golden light filtered through the curtains, bathing the living room in a soft, serene glow. The children were still asleep, their small bodies covered with blankets. Maria stood by the living room window, watching the empty street. There were no strange cars or men with dark caps. There were no shadows moving between the trees. For the first time in months, the street felt safe. The phone rang, pulling her from her thoughts. This time, it wasn't an unknown number. It was the police station. "Mrs. Garcia, I'm informing you that your ex-husband, Luis Montalvo, is in custody. A permanent restraining order has been established in your favor. Any attempt to contact you will be considered a violation of the order." The officer's voice was firm but polite. Maria felt her body completely relax. She lay down on the couch, leaned back, and closed her eyes. For the first time in a long time, she felt like something had truly ended. "Thank you, officer." "Really, thank you," she responded, her voice filled with relief. "Don't worry, Mrs. Garcia. If you need anything, don't hesitate to call us," the officer said before hanging up. Maria lowered the phone and looked at it for a moment. There were no more threatening shouts or intimidating text messages. No more mysterious photos or nighttime calls. It was all over. And although she could still feel the adrenaline rushing through her body, she knew that this peace wasn't temporary. She got up, headed to the kitchen, and made coffee. This time, the smell of coffee didn't mix with anxiety. This time, the aroma brought her peace. As the dark liquid slowly poured into the cup, she thought about everything she had faced. The nights of fear, the looks of disdain, Luis's manipulation, the days when she felt lost. Each of those moments had become a lesson. "Never forget who you are, Maria," she whispered to herself, holding the cup with both hands. A few hours later, the kids woke up with their usual energy. Camila ran to the kitchen with disheveled hair, while Sebastian rubbed his eyes with clenched fists. "Mom, I want pancakes," Camila shouted, climbing onto the chair at the table. "Today is going to be a champion's breakfast," Maria said with a smile as she pulled out the ingredients from the pantry. Sebastian, still half asleep, looked at her curiously. "Mom, why are you so happy today?" he asked while getting on the chair, tilting his head to one side. Maria approached, crouched to his level, and looked him directly in the eyes. "Because today is the first day of our new life, son. Today, nothing and no one will scare us again," she said, kissing him on the forehead. "Not even Dad?" Camila asked, turning her head with curiosity. Maria froze for a second, but didn't let the question affect her. She raised her gaze and answered with complete confidence. "Not even Dad. No one." The kids smiled and continued talking about the cartoons they wanted to watch after breakfast. For them, Life went on. For Maria, it did too, but with a strength she had never felt before. When she arrived at Lexus, the routine of the company continued as usual. Rebecca glanced at her sideways, but this time there were no sarcastic comments. Carlos greeted her with his usual friendly smile and left a sticky note on her desk. "You are stronger than you think." Maria smiled as she read it and tucked the note into her pants pocket. It hadn't been more than 30 minutes when Ana Fernanda called her into her office. The door was open, but Ana closed it as soon as Maria entered. "Sit down, Maria," Ana Fernanda said, her expression serious but calm. Maria sat down without asking, with her back straight and her hands on her knees. "I know this week has been more complicated than usual for you, and I want to acknowledge your strength," Ana Fernanda said as she leaned back in her chair. "Not many people could work under that pressure and still do flawless work." Maria smiled slightly. "I've learned that pressure only breaks you if you let it in," she answered calmly. Ana Fernanda squinted, evaluating her words. "That's the kind of mindset I want in this company. That's why I want to make you an offer. I want you to be my chief assistant for coordinating major projects. It won't be easy, but I'm sure you can do it," Ana Fernanda said, staring at her intently. Maria's heart raced for a moment. This wasn't just a promotion. It was proof that everything she had endured was worth it. "What do you say, Maria?" Ana Fernanda asked with a smile, showing that she already knew the answer. "I say yes." "And you won't regret it," Maria responded, smiling back. "That's what I want to see," Ana Fernanda said as she stood up to shake her hand. The way home was different. She no longer looked over her shoulder. The street felt less dangerous, not because something had changed outside, but because something had changed inside her. She wasn't scared. Not anymore. When she got home, she saw Dona Lupita playing with the kids at the entrance. Camila was laughing loudly, while Sebastian ran with a ball in his hands. Mom, look, Grandma Lupita is playing with us," Camila shouted with a big smile. "And she runs faster than we do," Sebastian added between laughs. Maria covered her mouth to hide her smile. Seeing them happy filled her with peace. "How was your day, sweetheart?" Dona Lupita asked, hands on her hips, breathing heavily. "I got promoted, Ms. Lupita. I'm the new lead assistant at the company," she replied with a smile full of pride. Ms. Lupita looked at her with sparkling eyes and approached to hug her. "I knew you could do it. I've always known you could do it," she whispered warmly. Maria hugged her tightly, feeling the warmth of someone who had always believed in her. This time, the victory didn't feel like a stroke of luck. It felt deserved. That night, after dinner with her children, Maria prepared a small surprise. She pulled out a chocolate cake she had bought on her way home. She placed it on the table and lit a candle in the center. "Is it our birthday?" asked Sebastian with his eyes wide open. "No, but today we're celebrating something bigger. Today we celebrate that we are a strong family, a family that never gives up," Maria said as she lit the candle. "Today we celebrate that no matter how many times they try to knock us down, we will always rise." The children smiled and clapped. Camila shut her eyes tightly and blew out the candle with all the energy she had. The three of them laughed together. That night, when she went to bed, Maria felt something different. This time, the house wasn't filled with shadows. There were no creaks to startle her, no mysterious calls to make her doubt. The children slept peacefully. Ms. Lupita rested in the next room. And for the first time, she allowed herself to do something she hadn't done in years. Sleep. Not because she wasn't afraid, but because she knew she had won. She had won peace, dignity, and control of her own life. She was no longer the woman waiting to be rescued. Now, she was the woman who rescued herself. And that no one could take away from her. If you liked this story, I invite you to leave a comment on how you felt hearing it, and if you've been through a similar betrayal situation, I'd love to hear your valuable opinion. I'd be honored if you left a like, shared the video with a friend or family member, and subscribed to the channel. Don't miss the next amazing story that's appearing on your screen right now. We have guaranteed entertainment exclusively for you. See you in the next video.